Welcome, everyone, to the 22nd AGM of the Canadian Association of Midwives. Bienvenue à tous nos membres à la 22e Assemblée générale de membres de l'association.
I would like to welcome you to the 22nd AGM of the Canadian Association of Midwives.
CAM president for the last 2.5 years. Mon nom est Alex Bacon, president de l'ACSF. I would like to acknowledge
My name is Alex Bacon. My preferred pronouns are he and she, and I have the honor of serving as the CAM president.
Language group. And I do want to recognize that their people have been living in harmony with the land and practicing their medicines, and Indigenous midwives have been catching babies on these lands since time immemorial. And I want to express my really heartfelt gratitude to my hosts for their stewardship and open invitation to be in relationship in a good way. I do also want to acknowledge that CAM's head office, we're joining you today from all across coast to coast to coast, but our head office is on the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation's territory. And you can see that land acknowledgement there. I think we're still working towards quorum. So if you have friends that you can text and poke, they can still register with the link to join in the moment, and we will get them in. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass it to Tonya to share some instructions for participation today.
Thank you, Alex. Welcome, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Alors, mon nom est Tonya Oquionero.
Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Tonya Oquionero. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Association of Midwives. My pronouns are she or her in English, and I would like to acknowledge that the offices of the CAM are located on the Kanien'kehá:ka, otherwise known as Montreal, where I live and work on the unceded lands of the numerous First Nations, and I have been working in this role since or with our group since 2005.
On how to use the platform, especially for those who are new this year. So you should have a video. You should see my face in the center of your screen with the PowerPoint presentation. To the side, there's a questions box. So you won't have an opportunity to speak during this AGM. So all questions, you could put all the questions in the question box. Also, at certain points in the meeting, we'll be asking for a mover and a seconder, and you can share your name in that box. And we have technical staff in the background who will be sharing those questions with the chair or other speakers, and we'll try to answer your questions as we move along with the presentation. If you are having any technical difficulties, do not use the question box. If you look up to the top right corner of your screen, there's a specific box that says technical support. So ask for help in the technical support question, and we have a separate group of technicians who will be able to guide you through whatever issues you're facing on the platform. Voting this year is quite straightforward. For those of you who were with us last year, we're using the same platform. So when we have a motion, the speaker will call for a mover and a seconder. So we'll expect you to share your name in the questions box, the chat box, and we will put a question out for a vote. Those of you who are registered with voting privileges, you'll see a pop-up box, very straightforward, and you will have 60 seconds to place your vote. If you do not see a pop-up box, you may have registered as a non-voting member, or at least you are tagged as a non-voting member on a registration list. So that's why you don't see it. To give an example, we're going to do a test vote. Are we ready to do a test vote? So the question for the test vote is, are midwives the best? So could we test this out with a mover and a seconder, please? So you have 30 seconds to share your name in the chat box. And I'll wait for confirmation. This is a test vote for those of you who are just joining. Alors, on fait un test sur le système de vote.
So we're just carrying out a little test vote for those of you who have just joined us.
I'm looking at my technical team here, just wondering if somebody put in their name as a mover and a seconder.
It's moved by Jennifer Nguyen, seconded by Brianna Thompson.
Thank you, Jennifer and Brianna. And now for the vote. Again, for those of you who are joining, we're just testing out the voting system. This is a test vote. We know midwives are the best already. Alors, on teste le système de vote pour
So
ceux qui
we are just carrying out a little test of the voting system for those who are just joining us here.
Is our vote box still up?
Motion is carried.
Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. Great. Alors, the last piece of instruction pour nos membres francophones.
So this is a reminder for our French members. We're offering simultaneous interpretation today. So all you have to do is click on the globe and you can choose English or French. And those who are going to speak, to please speak slowly for the benefit of the simultaneous interpreters.
So I'll ask the presenters and all of our speakers to speak slowly for the interpretation. You can toggle between the English and the French language translation on the platform as well. So I'm just going to do a check-in. I saw that people were trickling in and we're waiting for quorum. So we'll do a little check-in to see if we have quorum, Alex, before we officially open the annual general meeting. If we're still missing a couple of people, we can maybe start with a few more introductions, but I'll just wait for our technical team to confirm how many are on the platform. Just checking to see if the numbers are the same number of missing individuals for quorum. So while waiting for the quorum, before I pass it over to you, Alex, maybe to continue with some of the instructions, I'll just repeat some of the instructions I just mentioned. Any questions you may have, use the question box or the chat box to the side of your screen, the video screen. And on the top right corner, we have a technical support box in case you're having any type of technical difficulty. We have a separate team that can help you there. When it will be time to vote, the presenter will ask for a mover and a seconder. We ask that you use the chat box to share your name. And when it's time to vote, there'll be a pop-up box and you'll have 60 seconds to vote. If you do not have access to the pop-up box, you may have been registered as a non-voter. For example, staff won't have voting rights, so you won't see that pop-up show up. OK, alors, on n'a pas encore le quorum. Donc, comme Alex a dit un peu plus tôt.
So Alex said just a little earlier, we don't have quorum yet. And as Alex mentioned, of course, we're going to need to reach our quorum. So we're going to need 30 members, voting members, representing 2/3 of our provinces and territories. So while we are waiting, I'm just going to ask our President Alex Bacon to begin some remarks.
Voting members representing 2/3 of our provinces and territories. But in the meantime, I think we're very close to having quorum. So in the meantime, maybe we can just present other folks that are with us here on the platform.
Sounds good. Yes, I think we're maybe just shy one, actually. So I would like to introduce to you all a couple of people who are live with us today and are going to be speaking at the AGM. We have Alicia Julian Reed, who's co-chair of the National Council of Indigenous Midwives. We have Elizabeth Brandeis, who's our CAM Vice President and Chair of the Governance Committee. We have Judy DeFridas, who's our CAM Treasurer, and we have CJ Blennerhassett, who's our CAM President-elect. Everyone can give a little bit of a wave, please. Awesome. And then maybe, Tonya, if you can switch the slides for us, please, I can introduce the board and the exec while we're waiting for quorum. So this is our outgoing executive committee, the folks who we're serving through 22 and up to 23 so far. So I've already introduced myself and CJ and Elizabeth and Judy, and our outgoing secretary, Trish Langley from Pong, couldn't be with us today because she's attending a birth. But my big thanks and gratitude goes to these folks. And this is our current board of directors as it stands today. And also a big thank you to these folks for helping to keep CAM moving towards our intended impact. And hopefully, if there's anyone on the call from Nunavut or Yukon, and you want to work with CAM towards getting an association started, we would be thrilled to support you in that in your jurisdiction and to see a rep. And we've just gotten notice that quorum is met, which is fantastic. So we can now move to adopt the 2023 AGM agenda. The agenda is attached as a separate document, and you can find the link below the chat box. So with that, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda, please? And a seconder.
It's moved by Jennifer Nguyen, seconded by Kayla Gagnon.
Great. Thank you, Jen and Kayla. Are there any questions, comments, or discussion? You can always share your comments or questions using that chat box feature. No? Okay, if no discussion, then we'll bring the motion forward to a vote. So Terry, if you and your team could please, the window is going to automatically pop up and we'll have 60 seconds to vote. Feel like we should have musical interludes during the vote, or that I should have a bunch of Juba's cheesy knock knock jokes for you all. CJ, you'll humor me. I'll give you one of Juba's cheesy knock knock jokes. Knock knock.
Who's there?
House.
How's who?
How's it going? This is my life. Anyone else who has a 5-year-old will understand. Okay, I think the voting screen. Oh no, it still says vote in progress on my phone.
The motion is carried.
Great. Motion is carried. The agenda is adopted. Thank you. So now we're going to move to adopt the minutes of the 2022 AGM. And you can, again, view those minutes by clicking on that document link below the chat box. And we'll just give you a couple moments to do a little speed read if you haven't read them in advance. And then we'll ask for a motion to adopt those minutes. 2022 AGM feels like a long time ago.
Motion's moved by Maha Mariam Killoran, seconded by Sandy Pullen.
Thank you, Maha and Sandy. That's awesome. So now we'll open it for discussion. You can share comments in that chat box. Are there any comments or amendments to those 2022 AGM minutes? Oh, sorry, the ask a question box. That's where you can submit your comments. My apologies. Okay, in that case, we will now vote to adopt the 2022 AGM minutes. So that voting box is going to pop up and we will have another 60 seconds. Okay, because Crystal's egging me on, I'm going to give you another horrible knock knock joke to keep you busy. Judy, knock knock.
Who's there?
Orange.
Orange who?
Orange, you glad to see me? I have to say also, I got coaching from my awesome colleague, Andy Metzinger. He's a great coach if anyone's looking for one. And because we're good friends, he asked me to pay him in dad jokes. So I do have quite a treasure trove. They're clearly valuable to somebody. How are we doing with the vote there?
Motion is carried.
Motion is carried. Awesome. Thanks, Bryn. So the AGM minutes are adopted and we are going to roll our way into the CAM report. And I just kind of wanted to take a minute. You know, I'm just back from Nepal where I was with the UBC midwifery students. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity to get a bit of global perspective. And so I wanted to paint a little 30-second picture before we dive into our annual report. Because we know that the challenges facing midwives are the same, whether you're a lot of them, whether you're in a high income country or a low income country, whether in the global north or the global south. We know there's a shortage from the State of the World Midwifery report of almost 1 million midwives worldwide by 2030. And we know here in Canada, if we're going to reach our optimal skill set of providers, we're short about 9,000. We know female identified folks make up about 70% of the health worker jobs and globally over 90% of midwives, but only hold 25% of senior leadership roles. And that's from the Women in Global Health report that came out in 23, if you haven't read it yet. Then we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and we know that in the first 5 years, maternal mortality barely declined, if at all. Then we throw in pandemic, climate change, fragile states, and we know we have our work cut out for us. And in Canada, it's no different. We've had our share of challenges. We've seen midwifery start up in new jurisdictions, which has been really exciting, and then have these growing pains and kind of contractions, which are offering opportunities for necessary course corrections, that we're really clear on needing to define what an enabling environment is. And we do have a position statement coming out, hopefully in the fall, doing just that. But in the face of these challenges, we also have big wins. Sages-Femmes in Quebec are the first to expand their scope to include medical abortion, which is awesome. The midwifery education program reopened in Manitoba. Trudeau announced the Women's Voice and Leadership Fund, which we hope to tap into. So all that to say, if we move to our theory of change slide, I think that now it's more important than ever to recommit ourselves to our intended impact, which is in the pink square in the middle. That's equitable access to excellent sexual, reproductive, and newborn midwifery services for everyone. So Theory of Change is the new strategic plan for those who aren't familiar with it. And this one took us a good 18 months, but it was published in 2021. And you can see in the navy blue, our members are midwifery associations, but also individual midwives. And in the green, you can see the three pillars that we focus our work within. So that's association strengthening, promoting excellence, and advocacy. And I will say that during COVID, which was the entire of my term, we took the pause on that really outward social piece to look inwards and really work on structural alignment. And when I say that, what I mean is aligning our governance and our policies with their organizational values, which you can see in the baby blue circle there: equity, responsibility, integrity, and respect. So you'll hear from Elizabeth about the governance reform process. That's been a huge piece about really aligning with our values around equity and looking at diversity. We've adopted a policy development tool that uses the skills we've gotten from Stacey Alderwick and others. I don't know if some of you did Stacey's anti-racism workshops, but really looking at being able to evaluate our policies and ensure that they are moving forwards from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive lens, for example. So I do want to take a moment and look a little closer at our key accomplishments for 2022. Starting with advocacy. Our number one priority is to advocate under the direction of NCIM for a significant increase in renewal of funding for Indigenous midwifery. In the run-up to the announcement of the 22-23 federal budget, CAM and NCIM submitted pre-budget recommendations to the Federal Finance Committee, and these included funding for sustainable, community-owned Indigenous midwifery primary healthcare and education sites, ongoing investments in NCIM, and the inclusion of midwives in Canada's student loan forgiveness program for doctors and nurses. So we're really trying to hold the Liberals accountable for their election promise there. And we are very pleased to say that Canadian government is currently working with NCIM and a coalition of national Indigenous organizations to propose an updated investment in Indigenous midwifery. And I know Alicia will talk a little bit more about this work later on when she speaks with you. And we hope we'll have a little bit more information on student loan forgiveness for you later this year. Next slide, please. Of course, as always, much of our advocacy involves raising the profile of midwifery nationally. So to this end, Member of Parliament Mark G. Sayre stood in the House of Commons on IDM on May 5th and delivered a statement recognizing the work of NCIM and CAM and the important contribution that you as midwives and Indigenous midwives make to our public healthcare system. We have also in the fall, if you joined us for our November series, we did have the Honorable Jean-Yves Duclos, Minister of Health, and the Honorable Marcy Len, Minister of Women and Gender Equity and Youth, who delivered some virtual messages to us. Next slide. And our advocacy work extends globally. So in the fall of 2022, we attended the United Nations General Assembly and the ICM 100th anniversary events in New York. It was very exciting. It was the first time I had seen Tonya in 3D, as she says, in 3 years. And we also attended the launch of the Push for Midwives campaign. So if you haven't heard of the campaign, please visit www.pushcampaign.org to learn more. It's a really inspiring campaign to support midwives work globally. Here we see Tonya and Claire and Josiane and Alicia with the Health Minister Duclos, who came to visit us at our offices, which are amazing. And we did meet with many government stakeholders from various ministries and departments, including Health, Public Health Agency of Canada, which we call FAC sometimes if you hear that over the webinar, Global Affairs Canada, sometimes called GAC if you hear GAC, and Employment Services and Development Canada. Our advocacy work has really raised awareness of the important contribution that you midwives make to sexual and reproductive health in Canada and globally. And that's really paid off because we were invited by Global Affairs Canada and Public Health Agency of Canada to submit proposals for funding for 2023-24. And every proposal we submitted was funded. And I know that you'll hear a little bit more about that from Tonya in a little bit. Our next pillar of focus is association strengthening. And our association strengthening work is really founded in the longstanding partnership between NCIM and CAM. And the principles of that partnership, which are outlined in a memorandum of understanding from 2017, are really central to all our global programming. And we're now using our experiences and learnings and evidence to develop an association strengthening framework for member associations in Canada and abroad. Next slide, please. I do want to take a moment and recognize the leadership of several national alliances and caucuses and councils that have emerged in recent years and who've carved out a space for those who've really historically been silenced and excluded from midwifery organization and leadership. There's the Canadian Caucus for Queer and Trans Midwives. There's the Canadian Alliance of Racialized Midwives and the Student Midwives Association of Canada. More meaningful inclusion and relationship with these organizations was another piece that we were thinking of with governance reform, which I know Elizabeth will chat about later. So our goal in all of our bilateral relationships is to foster strong and mutually beneficial bilateral relationships. We also, of course, are working with other national midwifery organizations, including CAMED and CMRC, Canadian Midwifery Regulators Council. Perfect. So over the years, we've shared a lot on how we've partnered with NCIM and how...
Au fil des ans, nous avons parlé de nos partenariats, y compris des partenariats globaux pour renforcer les capacités. Les associations membres sur l'île de la Tortue ont dit « et nous chez... »
Midwifery Association Capacity Building Survey in 2021. And in 2022, after careful analysis of the results, we identified that most provincial and territorial associations in Canada have very low capacity in the areas of communication and financial management, funding, strategic advocacy, networks, and leadership, those kind of real core areas of midwifery association. So we set out to develop a platform to support associations. And the website, The Exchange, was just launched, and it's going to continue to grow and serve as a hub of information and training and resources for midwifery association staff and leadership who are actively building their associations. And we're also hoping that this is going to strengthen networks and promote knowledge exchange between midwifery associations. So the site is up and running, and we encourage you, if you're a leader of midwifery association, if you're a staff member of a midwifery association, to please jump on there and start to use some of the resources available. It's kind of fun. They've gamified it a little bit. And the more you use it, the different animals you get to transform into. So please hop on, let us know what you think. If you have any questions, reach out to our CAM staff for support. I also conducted my master's research on enhancing networking opportunities for CAM and our member associations, and this kind of knowledge sharing, asynchronous discussion board. There's templates for research and policy you'll see came up as one of the suggested actions. So it was amazing that this was already pretty much ready to go. And thanks to all those who've helped to make it a reality. I'm going to pass it to Tonya. Oh, wait, I'm not. First, I'm going to tell you about, we also, in terms of promoting excellence, have invested in a new learning management system, and that's going to help us track MESP offerings, or ESW rather. That's my BC lens sneaking in, as well as other workshops. Now I'll pass it to Tonya.
Thanks, Alex. Didn't know you were such a comedian. Noted. Love the knock knock jokes. You got more fans than you think. OK, on to promoting excellence. Alors, promouvoir l'excellence pour la pratique sage-femme.
For midwives,
So again, in 2022, we held our third virtual conference called November. We had over 400 attendees and a huge variety of speakers, and we had our regular sponsors and exhibitors who supported the event. Yes, this was our third virtual conference. And although we miss seeing you all in person, and it is important, and we really look forward to seeing you in the fall of 2023 in Ottawa, we realize that the virtual platform does allow a whole group of members who normally don't attend our conference to come and exchange and gain more knowledge. So we're really looking closely how to combine both the virtual and the in-person, not necessarily in the same event, but possible rotation, etc. More information on that to come. But just to say that our virtual event again in 2022 was a success, and you see here our keynote opening address, Jenny Joseph, who was also named Times Magazine Woman of the Year in 2022. And on to our national programming. So this is an area that I'm particularly excited about. Over the last 2-3 years, I would say we really put a lot of effort on the program development side to search for funding, most importantly from the Public Health Agency of Canada and Health Canada, really making the case that midwives had important contributions to make to reproductive health care. And so we've been successful, as Alex mentioned just earlier. This is one of the projects that we have been continuing to do. It's more commonly known as our vaccine project. We continue to work on this particular body of work. The objectives in 2022, 2023 were to build the capacity of midwives as vaccinators, to support community-based education, promotion, and outreach, and to build the capacity for evidence-based vaccination communication. Through this particular project, we were able to have a community of practice, and a new innovative approach that we tested and was very successful was our micro-granting program. So we had a number of associations and midwifery clinics who were able to access microgrants, and this was quite successful in helping to build the capacity, especially for the associations with less capacity. For midwifery clinics, the grants allowed them to procure essential equipment and establish protocols to provide vaccination to their clients. And we also have clinics who developed culturally safe outreach practices and resources. With this program funding, we also started a podcast series. We haven't launched the podcast just yet. It gave us the opportunity to finish the recordings of the podcasts, and we will be launching that in the fall, likely in September of 2023. The funding that we received from the Public Health Agency of Canada also allowed CAN to develop an evidence synthesis to understand the barriers and the facilitators to the implementation and integration of midwives as vaccine providers. So we hope that this information, this evidence-based tool that we now have developed, will be useful for decision makers as we advance on this conversation and inform future vaccine-related healthcare decisions that are made provincially, territorially, or nationally. I started reporting on this particular project a couple of years ago. So we're in year 3, actually the final months of this project. Midwives Recognize and Respond to Family Violence. This is a project that we're doing in partnership with the National Council of Indigenous Midwives. So just a couple of highlights from 2022. We have 18 midwifery students who participated in an undergraduate 2-day workshop developed by McMaster University. They were our partners on this project. 41 practicing midwives and midwifery students participated in an online workshop followed by a half-day workshop. One was held in Toronto, and we had a second one in Vancouver in 2022. We have a dozen Indigenous midwives and students who participated in a 4-part series and discussion circles that were developed by NCIM. And we hosted a panel discussion on gender-based violence, followed by a member discussion at the November conference. In addition to these trainings and presentations, our project team has been very busy developing a whole suite of resources for you, the midwives, and for your clients as well. You can visit our website to see some of these beautiful resources. We are in full dissemination mode. Over the next few months, between now and October, we'll be by any means possible disseminating this information through our social networks, our website, etc. So be on the lookout. These are really meant for you to be using in your clinic and with your clients. Some more images from the resources that we've developed. Et toutes les ressources, évidemment, sont disponibles.
Of course, all resources are available in English and in French.
So this programming has been successful. And as Alex mentioned, we put more efforts in 2022. We were invited, in fact, in some cases to access some of the funding. So we developed proposals on topics that are priority areas in our theory of change. And we were successful in getting all of these 3 projects that are funded by the Health Canada, specifically on topics around tackling racism, Indigenous racism in our healthcare system, midwives and the provision of abortion, for example, working with new immigrant populations. There's a whole suite of topics, and we'll be developing learning opportunities and resources for midwives. More to come on that throughout the year. And of course, our CJMRP, the journal that you've been receiving in your mailbox for many, many, many years. So you've continued to receive a print copy of the journal in your mailboxes. You will be receiving the final print copy imminently in your mailboxes. I was going to say inbox. I feel like it's rare that I actually go to my mailbox, but I know for some of you, this journal is a real precious tool. Really, it's the only national journal that publishes midwifery-specific research. So we will continue to publish this journal, but we are moving over to a digital format in the fall. So we're working on a timeline. It will likely be towards the end of the fall, early winter. You will continue to receive the CJMRP, but in a digital format. We've been working on this for a few years. We know that it's been a request from our members to have the option to receive a digital format. So it is forthcoming, but you will be receiving a final print copy in your mailboxes very shortly. And I want to take a moment to thank the team behind the CJMRP. This is a lot of work and a lot of volunteer hours go into this. Patricia McNiven with McMaster University has been the editor-in-chief for, I cannot remember since when. I've been working with Patty for a very, very long time on the journal. I'm her partner in crime on the publication side, and she leads the editorial team. So Patty, I don't know how many hours you spent putting this journal together, but I can't thank you enough for the hours and hours and hours that you have put into producing a quality journal for our members. And I want to thank Leanne, who's likely not with us during this AGM, but we'll be sure to thank her separately as well. I just want to recognize the work that she's been doing, again, since I've been with the Canadian Association of Midwives. So this is going back more than a decade. She is the production coordinator, oversees the layout and et cetera, the translations of our journal, of the content of the journal. So I want to just really publicly thank Leanne and Patty for all the work they've contributed to this publication. And our global program continues. I am so excited to watch this program blossom. It officially started with 4 global affairs funded projects back in 2016, but historically, even before that, through our partnership, which started in 2009, 2008, 2009 with l'Association des Sages-Femmes d'Haïti, 2011 with our partnership with TAMA, the Tanzania Association of Midwives, and of course, all this on the backdrop of our partnership with the National Council of Indigenous Midwives, and really trying to mirror those partnership principles that we have listed in our Memorandum of Understanding with NCIM. So our program is strong. We have a strong program implementation team. We have a strong program development team. And the donors, in particular, Global Affairs Canada and the United Nations Population Fund, are really paying attention to our work. And we're being invited to continue to participate on global projects. So in 2022, we continue to partner on projects in Haiti, in South Sudan, Somalia, and Somaliland, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Our work continues to focus on 4 key areas: association strengthening and advocacy, midwifery education, quality of care, and research and innovation. So I'm just sharing some photos on the screen of some of the different projects that we've continued. So we led the Smart RMC project. We completed our first year in 2022. Passerelle, I think a slide just passed on Passerelle. This is our project in Haiti. We completed our second year of our 5-year project. On the SMEPS project, we are working with our colleagues, midwifery associations in Somalia, Somaliland, and Puntland. So we were in year 4 of 5-year projects, and we completed our work in South Sudan as well. But we continue to work with our South Sudan colleagues at the association through our Smart RMC project. Also excited to announce that we have 1 secured new project starting up in Venezuela. So this will be the first time we are officially working in South America. So we'll be working in partnership with the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, as we often do in Venezuela. And we also are waiting on a response from a project that we submitted on request from Global Affairs Canada to work with our colleagues TAMA in Tanzania. So continue to build on the work we've already been doing. I've come to the end of the annual report, Alex, but just before I hand it back to you, I want to say a special thank you to all of the CAM and the NCIM staff. Huge volume of work being produced, was produced in 2022 and continues to be produced. And obviously we wouldn't be able to achieve all of this without the dedicated team that we have. The team continues to grow, and the dedication is always there. Through good times and harder times like the pandemic. So thank you very much to staff. And I also want to share a very special thank you to the members who get involved. We need you. You get involved in many different ways. You are volunteers, you are consultants, but the expertise that you bring to this work is very, very important, be it on national work, on global work. We do need you. So if you are new, perhaps you're new to CAM, perhaps you're new to midwifery, perhaps you have an interest and you want to learn more about what we have, what opportunities we have, please contact us through our website. You'll find contact information, and we'll be happy to share with you opportunities that are currently open or future opportunities to come. But you can see with the volume of programming that there will be opportunities to get involved. And on that, I'll pass it over to you, Alex.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tonya. And I want to just echo your appreciation for our staff in all the areas and departments and all volunteers and consultants for such vibrant offerings for midwives here at home and abroad, and engaging in all these amazing relationships and partnerships. And it's cool to see them grow. I'm now going to invite Alicia Julian Reed, who's going to share the report for NCIM.
Great, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Tonya. Walalan. So as a reminder, the National Council of Indigenous Midwives, our vision is to see Indigenous midwives in every Indigenous community. An important, very important decision and conversation, an announcement that we made, although it's not 2022, it is relevant. We wanted to give context here today, so thank you. We have been known with the acronym often pronounced as NACM, the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives, since its founding times. We had a really meaningful discussion of the history of the name. It was very thoughtful in using Aboriginal at that time, based on the context of how that really was original to Canada in regards to legislation and what's stated there. And the elders that were involved with the founders of NACM at that time were able to describe that. And we didn't take it lightly. We wanted to make sure that we did get proper feedback from our membership. So we did put out a survey, and it was a relief to see that from the core leaders' recommendations, we got a majority who chose NCIM the National Council of Indigenous Midwives. And part of that feedback was the expression of gratitude. And I think when leadership is moving forward on big changes, it is really reassuring to hear feedback that you're on the right course. And that was initiated because of conversations that different membership and even community members had spoke to co-chairs in the past about changing the word Aboriginal to Indigenous to reflect the time that we're in. And many organizations have made similar changes. Community. So community engagement, as we know, changed through the pandemic, and it was a raging success led by Evelyn here at National Council Indigenous Midwives in connection with CAM. There was a 3-day Restoring Indigenous Midwifery and Birth virtual forum with nearly 700 participants. We were being told by organization members from different health organizations, Indigenous organizations across the country, government organizations giving us feedback that they found it very helpful and informative and inspiring. So that was a very exciting part of 2022. One really successful work and project that was done called the Decolonizing Birth Strategy in connection and partnership with Nova Scotia Native Women's Association happened in the summer of 2022. I was pleased to take part in the leadership. That's my home community, homeland is Mi'kma'ki. That's where I'm calling from today. We were able to see 13 plus one with the Halifax Friendship Center, really meaningful engagements with community. There were life givers and family members, elders, knowledge keepers who came out to discuss birth stories, how things were done before, areas they wanted to see improvement. And really out of that work, launch a current opportunity as the Nova Scotia Health Transformation is taking place with Dejigamic, which is the Mi'kmaq Health Authority. That work now has turned into the implementation of an education program that will be community-based and the building of a birth center in Buttingig First Nations specifically. As many know, due to the very sad loss of Joyce Echaquan, came some very progressive movement towards addressing anti-Indigenous racism in our healthcare systems. So part of that work that was done is an anti-racism sharing circle, specifically for Indigenous student midwives, was held in December of 2022. Also, what took place was the development of an evaluation framework and the ability to facilitate the National Council of Indigenous Midwives Anti-Indigenous Racism Working Group. And that continues to work very hard, as you'll continue to see with a lot of the work that will be happening nationally. As many of you have heard the rumblings of an Indigenous midwifery education that has been working off of the framework that was formed over the years. This last part, the first phase, was the introduction to Indigenous midwifery course. It was developed and delivered to 15 students from 6 communities. There was a visioning meeting with the Indigenous Midwifery Education Committee to discuss strategic vision of the project beyond 2023. And one really great success was a very strategic partnership with Athabasca University, which allows community members to enter into certain courses without meeting certain prerequisites, basically the removal of barriers to help current students move forward with their education for things like anatomy and physiology. And as Alex mentioned, the advocacy work and the, the advocacy and government relations work that has been done, specifically the Advisory Committee on Indigenous Women's Wellbeing, which is known as IWAC. It was actually first established in the spring of 2018 as a part of Canada's response to the reports of forced and coerced sterilizations of Indigenous women in Canada. The National Council of Indigenous Midwives is currently co-chair alongside LFMO, which is the Métis organization of Indigenous Métis women across the country. Working with them, the objective of this committee is to provide the Government of Canada with advice, guidance, and direction on issues impacting the health and wellness of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. IWAC has become an important platform for NCIM to advocate for Indigenous midwifery and to elevate midwifery as a profession across the country. And this brings me smiles and of joy and sadness. Lalin, thank you, Alicia and Apale. Alicia and myself, Alicia, often have our names mispronounced together in meetings, and neither of us are fussed, but we enjoy telling one another that we have the best name. And Alicia has done incredible, dedicated work for NCIM. She is outgoing director, and after 8 years, she deserves tears and hugs, but we're glad she's not far from us. But we'll forever be connected to her, thankfully. And she did more than lead. She's such a great example of a leader. And we want to welcome, in Mi'kmaq we say Jalasi, in French you say bienvenue, but yes, Ellen Blay, our incoming NCIM Executive Director. She will soon be joining us at the end of the month, and we are thrilled. She comes with such an incredible amount of experience leading and directing in Ontario on a provincial level, and she has an innate ability to see the big picture and on the ground elements of Indigenous midwifery, and we're really excited for her leadership at NCIM. And I will hand it off.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It's so amazing to see the momentum and power behind NCIM, and can't believe all the beautiful, I feel like things are coming to harvest. All these seeds you've planted are blossoming everywhere. I would now like to introduce Elizabeth Brandeis, our Vice President and Chair of the Governance Committee, to talk about our governance reform work.
Thank you, Alex, and hi, everybody. I'm joining the meeting today from the beautiful and amazing lands that Alex acknowledged at the beginning of the meeting. I've spent the last several days in the territories of the Squamish and Lil'wat nations, and I'm flying back to my home province of Ontario to where I live on the lands of the Anishinaabeg and Haudenosaunee Confederacy, covered with the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant, which teaches us to care and share for the land together. And I'm really happy to speak about the CAM governance reform through a lens of trying to do our very best to enter a right path with the colonial parliamentary governance structure that we've inherited, and to make changes that reflect the values that Alex spoke about. I'm also very excited to share this presentation as an outgoing member of the CAM board and an outgoing chair of this governance committee, just with so much gratitude for all that I've learned and all of the connections I've been able to make over these incredible last 8 years or so on CAM. We can advance the slide, please. So why have we engaged in this process of governance reform? This has been a conversation that the CAM board has been engaged in for many years, actually, really thinking about how to enact the values of our theory of change and to live into our values. And looking at governance reform from a lens of better equity and representation is really at the heart of it. So this came from a deep reflection on our intended impact, how we can actually, enact the values and the intended impact of the organization. We looked around and asked the question, if we can go back to the previous slide. We looked at our current system and asked, do we have the right people around the table to achieve those goals? And are we sure that the current representation of the board of directors really does include an equitable representation of our members that we represent? Next slide, please. So what are we trying to accomplish with this process? Ensuring the diversity of membership, diversity that may or may not be reflected by our member associations who currently represent the bulk of the board, and that we're choosing the right people who have the skill sets and interest to advance the theory of change that Alex reminded us of at the start of our meeting. And another really important goal behind our governance reform work is to engage more members in CAM's work. So I'll walk you through a bit of what the process of engagement was, but one of the questions that we asked the participants, the members who engaged with us about this issue, is that many people didn't feel that there were sufficient opportunities to engage with CAM. And so that was something that we really took to heart in thinking about what we wanted to change. So this is CAM's current structure. And as you can see, it's what's called a confederate board, or a board that represents, it's a board of associations. We are an association of associations. So the majority of members who sit on the CAM board currently are the leaders or presidents, chairs of the provincial and territorial member associations throughout Canada. There's also the co-chairs from the National Council of Indigenous Midwives and a representative from the Student Association of Canada. In addition to those seats, there is also the executive. So the executive committee includes the president-elect in the years that we have a president-elect, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. And so we end up with a very large board of 19 people. And the 15 CAM directors are appointed by the member associations, typically the president, sometimes somebody else who's delegated with that responsibility. And then 4 of the CAM officers who sit on the executive are appointed by the board. So that's our current structure. And if you advance to the next slide, I can walk you through what our process has been to figure out, okay, well, if we're looking at thinking about a more representative board, a board that represents more equity and creates more opportunity for a diversity of engagement, what might that look like? So back in just over a year ago, the governance committee, along with the board, developed a series of questions for focus groups of both members and stakeholders to get more information to direct this process, as well as figured out who are those key stakeholders who we need to hear from to inform this process. Throughout the summer and early fall, we conducted 18 stakeholder groups, as well as members. So a very robust stakeholder engagement process, as well as through the fall contracted with an external consultant to review that data. So as that data became available from those focus groups, an external contractor looked at that data and sifted through it to see what are the kinds of recommendations that will meet the needs of the stakeholders we interviewed. So throughout the fall, that was a very intensive process of reviewing that data and digesting it. And then in the wintertime, the board of directors reviewed that engagement through a facilitated discussion led by our external consultant. And that led us to the recommendation that I'm bringing to you today. So to be clear, the purpose of this presentation really is information. This is a process that both the governance committee and the board have committed to doing as well and as consultatively as possible. And that speed is really not the goal here, but getting it right and feeling like we have a good understanding from our membership of what the goals are we're trying to accomplish, and an agreement from our membership that this is the right way to go. So think of this as sort of an introduction to the concepts. And if we move to the next slide, I can give you a little bit of a timeline of what to expect going forward. I beg your pardon. I will talk you through the current state and then we'll talk about next steps. Okay, so what do we know about our current provincial and territorial associations? That's the P/T beside member associations. So what we know from our engagement with the membership is that we don't want to do away with provincial and territorial associations being included in a really core way in the governance structure. In other words, it's critical that that provincial and territorial association voice is included in the governance structure of CAM in order to make decisions that reflect the needs of midwives across the country. The other thing that we know is that 7 to 8 of the provincial territorial associations out of the 11 that exist are considered low capacity associations. We know that the resources and the evolutions of midwifery across the country really vary. And so, here we see that the majority of our member associations are considered low capacity, so don't necessarily have the rich resources of staffing, of a large board, of many members within the association to do the CAM work that's required of the representative of that member association who sits on the board. We also know that 2 territories don't have member associations at all. So in the Yukon and Nunavut, we don't have associations to draw from to say, this is the delegate from those associations if they don't even exist. We also know that provincial and territorial associations are really the best entity to understand the issues related to the rural, remote, and urban practices that exist within their jurisdiction, the model of funding, whether it's an employment model or an independent contract model, to understand the working conditions, the various unique issues and models that are posing challenges or opportunities for those associations. We also know that provincial and territorial associations seek peer support through CAM. So CAM is that critical hub of being able to connect member associations to one another and to really enact the strategic goal of member association capacity building. And so the provincial territorial associations want to see that support really being bolstered and providing more of the association strengthening. That's one of the core streams of work of CAM. And we also know that member associations really value the connections that happen through CAM and seek even further networking opportunities. The capacity built within the association is only made stronger by making connections with our midwife colleagues across the country. We know that currently, as I showed in that original slide of who is represented on the board, that when that structure was set up, the Canadian Alliance of Racialized Midwives, also known as CARM, or the Canadian Caucus of Queer and Trans Midwives, QTM, weren't in a place of being formed as a national representative body. We also need to be alive to the possibility that new associations may form in the future. And so having a governance structure that provides an opportunity for representation of these critical allied organizations to form some kind of bilateral relationship with CAM is so important in order to be representative of the needs of the members. We know that the relationship between CAM and NCIM is something that has been tended to and cared for and formed in a really thoughtful way over many, many years. And we want a governance structure that allows that kind of thoughtful relationship and that representative collaboration to be able to exist for other national organizations as well. So just as a recap for those of you who may have joined after Alex's opening remarks about the theory of change, the intended impact is equitable access to excellent sexual, reproductive, and newborn midwifery services for everyone. And these are the pillars of work for CAM: advocacy, promoting excellence, and associations strengthening, cross-cut or underlined with an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or the acronym JEDI, lens to all of that work. So this strategic direction really needs to be kept in mind when we're formulating our recommendations for making change to the way our governance works. Okay, next slide. So what we're bringing to the membership today is a recommendation. This is really our, like I was mentioning before, our kind of first of many steps in engaging the membership. I shouldn't say first because we had that previous step, the really critical step of member engagements with focus groups and engaging our critical stakeholders. But this is really where the first time we're bringing this recommendation to the membership. We're not asking for a vote today. We're not asking for any kind of movement towards immediate transformation. And as I was mentioning, that we really want from the membership today to understand the spirit of this recommendation before we move to the kind of business of adopting new bylaws, constitutional changes, in terms of references for this new structure. So stay tuned for that timeline of when we will be moving forward with those more formal steps. But the recommendation that we're bringing you today, that the board has really thoughtfully come up with, is that we move into a structure of 4 new advisory councils, which are each responsible for bringing recommendations to the board in the 4 key areas that really represent the streams of work of CAM. So those 4 key areas, as mentioned, are association strengthening, advocacy, promoting advocacy, and let me group them appropriately. Association strengthening and advocacy, promoting excellence, bringing the work of CAM Global in a formal way into the work of the board, and that cross-cutting kind of foundational principle of anti-oppression, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's important that we still also have a board of directors. The way not-for-profits like CAM need to be governed is through a board of directors, and that those 4 advisory councils would feed into a newly structured board of directors, which continues to hold the fiduciary responsibility of CAM. So that means responsibility to its financial health and to ensure that CAM is working towards enacting its strategic goals. And it would be monitoring and approving that theory of change, or the strategic plan of CAM, that there's governance, policy, and financial oversight. And then also that direct relationship that the board has with the executive director. So maintaining that relationship as the connection between the executive director and the board, that includes recruitment, oversight of the work, and as well as government relations. Next slide, please. So what does that actually look like? These are those 4 advisory councils that I described. So strategic oversight and recommendations would be overseen by the Member Association Advisory Committee. And that Member Association Advisory Committee is made up by those representatives of the provincial and territorial reps who currently sit on the CAM board. The responsibility of that advisory committee would be, like I said, strategic oversight and making those recommendations into the board. And the membership would be confirmed in the bylaws that each member association must appoint a representative to sit on that member association in order for there to be that direct relationship between CAM and all of the Canadian member associations. Moving over to the right quadrant, the right upper quadrant, the Clinical Excellence Advisory Committee would have strategic oversight and make recommendations around the strategic goal of promoting excellence. That membership would be a skills-based terms of reference, and it would be open to a call for interest for those interested in clinical excellence. So whether that be from various streams of midwifery education, there would be opportunities for student involvement as well, for folks who are instrumental in writing clinical practice guidelines or participating in emergency skills education, that kind of thing. Then moving down to the right lower quadrant, the Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Group would also be a skills and lived experience-based terms of reference, open again to a call for interest. There may be a connection with the JEDI Advisory Committee and CARM and QTM, as well as NCIM. And then moving to the left lower quadrant, this would be where the global program is again represented through folks who have skills, interest in that particular area. And this is an area where there hasn't, as I've said, been a direct connection between CAM Global programs and the board of directors itself. So as you can see, this is a way that all of the pillars of work that CAM is engaged in would have a really important seat and voice at the table, providing strategic oversight and recommendations to the board. Next slide. So then what would the board itself look like? So as you can see, each of these quadrants then feeds in to the board of directors. What you may notice is that one of the current structures of the board of directors that would no longer exist is the executive committee as we currently know it. And so instead of having a president, vice president, president-elect, secretary, and treasurer, that would be replaced by this structure of, and I beg your pardon, of course, the NCIM co-chairs. That structure would be replaced by a chair and a co-chair, which would be kind of the president and vice president or president-elect kind of rotating structure. It's a requirement of the legislation that we're under to have a treasurer position, so that position would remain. And then, of course, the 2 seats for representatives from NCIM, as well as dedicated seats, 2 seats from CARM, the Canadian Association of Racialized Midwives, as well as from QTM to have the queer trans midwives voice represented directly onto the board of directors. There would be 3 representatives from the member association advisory committee. And we chose 3 because we have a recognition that there are unique needs and representative perspectives that we would still want to have fed into the board. And so those 3 reps would represent a large kind of higher capacity member association, a smaller self-described lower capacity member association, as well as a northern perspective to have those 3 perspectives represented at the board, as well as a rep from the other advisory committees, the global program and the clinical excellence advisory committees. So as you can see, it's a pretty radical shift, but we think that this structure allows for that really important member association voice to be augmented by board representatives who have the skills, lived experience, and expertise to inform these other areas of CAM's work as well. Next slide. So where do we go from here? As I alluded to, this is the first of many steps before we're actually enacting this change. The next step being in a few short months at the CAM conference in October, that we would be holding a separate special general meeting. So that the fall conference allows us to present further details. I would say that today's presentation gives you the broad strokes. What we don't have yet are bylaws to show you that would tell us more about how exactly are we populating these new advisory councils. Is it appointments or voting? What are the terms? Those are not questions we yet have answers to. But once we have a vote of confidence from the membership and an opportunity to provide a bit more detail to the structure, we would feel then empowered to carry on and develop those new bylaws incorporating these changes. So you can see this is a really stepwise process where today is really an FYI, letting you know that, we've been kind of mulling over and providing some shape and structure to this recommendation. Then in the fall, you'll have an opportunity to hear more details, and we will actually ask for a vote that members have their questions answered and feel confident in the current structure to make those moves towards implementing this new structure. So by the time we arrive at this meeting in June 2024 at the AGM, we will feel prepared to actually hold a membership vote on the adoption of new bylaws. That will then give us the following year to really begin to populate this new structure. So, as you can see, these kinds of major structural changes just simply can't happen quickly, nor do we want them to happen quickly, because we want to make sure we've answered those important questions thoughtfully and well, and received input from our members about areas where there may be concerns, maybe areas that we haven't thought to dig into with a finer lens. And so ultimately, the actual implementation of the new structure wouldn't happen until June 2025. And in there, between AGM 24 and AGM 25, we have another opportunity at the CAM conference to provide an information session to hopefully drum up a lot of interest and really start that recruitment process for having folks ready to get on these new advisory councils and to fly with the new structure. Next slide, please. So that's the conclusion of that report. I am happy to pause if there are questions in the question box. I don't know if we're at that point where we can take a couple of questions, but really, like I said, this is the opportunity for the membership to be aware of the process to date. And to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So like I mentioned, there will be opportunities at the CAM conference. I hope to see many of you there. And if questions bubble up during this period, we're really happy to answer them. I do see one comment of feeling that this is a promising process. So that's really excellent to hear, and very excited to hear more feedback and engage more with you folks in October. And I think unless there are other comments or questions, I can pass it over back to you, Alex, or to you, Judy.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Yes, it is time for our treasurer report with Judy.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. Thank you for joining us at the AGM this year. My name is Judy DeFreitas, and I am the treasurer. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm currently coming to you as a guest from the lands of the Syilx and Okanagan First Nation people. Before I start the financial report, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank all the hardworking staff at CAM. It's due to this amazing team, the work that they do, and the leadership that we've been able to address so many of the pillars in our theories of change. And I want to just let them know how grateful I am for all the work that they do. So moving on to our report, in 2022, our audit was completed by Patricia McGovern, and she has been doing our audits for the last several years. And the most significant finding of her report was there was no significant findings, which is great. It shows how well managed our finances are. And so on May 25th of 2023, the CAM Board of Directors voted to accept the financial statements You can review all of the financial statements by clicking on the link on your screen if you wanted to look at it in more details. But essentially, we finished a year with a larger than projected surplus of $117,869. That was approximately $27,869 more than initially projected. So that shows that we are in a good, healthy financial situation. And the board also voted to approve a deficit budget of up to $30,000 for 2023. We continue to have a healthy cash reserve of $211,846.52. And it is also at this time that we will be undergoing another membership or biannual membership fee increase, which will be starting in 2024. And before I move on to the motion for our choosing our auditor for next year, I also wanted to highlight the incredible work of Sunny, who is our Director of Finance, and her team for all the incredible work they do and all the audits, not just this from Patricia, but all the audits from our external funders. So if I could have the next screen, this is for the motion. So this motion is to appoint our auditor for 2023, and it is as follows. Be it resolved that Patricia McGovern, Chartered Accountant, is appointed Auditor of the Canadian Association of Midwives to hold office until the next annual general meeting of members at such remuneration as may be fixed by the Board of Directors. Can I get a motion and a second for this?
Motion's moved by Jennifer Nguyen, seconded by Cecilia Javette.
Thank you, Jennifer and Seal. Yeah, if there are any questions that you would like to put into the question box, please do so, and I'm happy to tackle any of those. All right, if there are no questions, we can call the vote.
Motion is carried.
Thank you. Back to you, Alex.
Thanks so much, Judy. That was very short and sweet and surplus. As long as we're in the black, right? That's bringing us to the close of our AGM. So I want to say it's been such an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be in this role as chair for the past 2.5 years. I really want to take a moment and thank our outgoing members of the executive who finished their term today. That's Elizabeth Brandeis, who's been our VP, and before that was the rep for Ontario when she was AOM president. Elizabeth has brought us so much in expertise in human relations, in negotiations, in the equity piece. It's been super fun to work with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth is also a really great friend and colleague. And Trish Langley Frimpong, who couldn't be with us today, but also Trish was a student rep before being our secretary. And Trish offers these incredible reframes and asks the most amazing questions. And then our decision-making process was so much more considered and thorough thanks to her presence. So my big gratitude goes out to each of them. And I'm really excited to welcome CJ Blennerhassett as our incoming president. I don't think I could be more excited to see you leading and for the energy that you're going to bring the organization and your leadership and all the such cool things that you're doing. So thanks so much, CJ. I pass it on to you.
Thank you, Alex. That's little Miss Rosie there, who's also saying hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending the AGM today. Also, happy first day of Pride Month. As you heard, my name is CJ Blennerhassett. My pronouns are they and she, and I'm speaking to you today from Mi'kma'ki, the lands of the Mi'kmaq, colonially now known as Nova Scotia. I'm a settler who was born in this province and raised across the country in Iqaluit Nunavut, the lands of the Inuit, and on the lands of the Dene, the Métis, and the Clecho, now called Hay River and Yellowknife Northwest Territories. Today, I'm really honored to take on this role of president. I've been involved with CAM's work for, I think, almost a decade now, since my days as a student at McMaster University, where I graduated in 2016. I've lived and practiced in both Toronto, Ontario, and here in Mi'kma'ki. In addition to being a midwife, I'm a firefighter and first responder. I'm also a teen parent. My daughter is now a teenager herself. I'm a former editor of a feminist magazine for girls and trans youth, former co-chair of the Canadian Caucus of Queer and Trans Midwives, and I'm currently working towards a Master of Health Administration at Dalhousie University here. I'm really excited to work even more closely with leadership and with staff at the National Council of Indigenous Midwives, also with the representatives of CAM's provincial and territorial associations, with the new CAM executive, and with CAM staff, who you all don't get to see a ton of, but who we on the board know are essential to CAM's work, the work of midwives across the country, and those around the world through our global programs. So speaking as a midwife for a moment, apart from my role with CAM, I really cannot overstate the value of staying engaged with the work of our National Professional Association. We can only improve the position of midwives and the profession of midwifery in this country if we work together. As Elizabeth said, CAM is the place that really links us all. And given all that we've been through over the last few years, and I know for many of us, we've been through a lot, it's all the more important that we remain connected. So on that note, I look forward to the opportunity to get to know all of you over the next few years. Finally, I want to begin my term by acknowledging the contributions of the many leaders who have come before, who have graciously shared their knowledge and expertise. Today, I'm taking over from Alex, a leader whose shoes I cannot possibly fill, and whose style of leadership is to make room for as many pairs of shoes and as many styles as possible in the room. It has been a true privilege to be mentored by Alex and to watch how she nurtures real relationships with midwives here and around the world through her global work, but also with other associations and organizations in a real authentic practice of solidarity. Beyond her last 2 years as president, Alex has been on CAM's board of directors since 2014 and has given much to both midwives and the profession of midwifery. She is a humble leader who makes space for the perspectives of everyone. She has a real critical eye that is always seeking to understand how we can better make room, how we can listen better, and how we can improve the way we govern ourselves, and how we can support developing leaders. In particular, I have watched her use her position of relative power to effectively center the work of Indigenous midwives, and I can only hope to do the same. Alex, it has been a true pleasure to learn from you, to witness the way you work with others with such empathy and skill. We wish you nothing but success and maybe less emails in your future. Thank you for your leadership.
Thanks so much, CJ. That was super sweet. And there was some beautiful, I don't know, I'll probably spill water everywhere if I try and show them to you, but a beautiful bouquet of flowers came. So thank you very much to the staff for organizing that. It's time then to adjourn the meeting, but just before we do that, I want to remind you of all the ways you have to connect with CAM. All our social presence is here. So please do tag us in your posts and check out. We're always posting. If you're going to be in Bali for ICM, please let us know. We're going to host a CAM social during the Congress, and in our weekly newsletters, we've been asking you to tell us. So, and if we have your permission to contact you so we can gather ourselves together. And I want to remind everyone that our in-person finally conference is happening in Ottawa, October 4th to 6th at Delta Hotels by Marriott in Ottawa. And I can confirm that tickets went on sale today, and there is an early bird deal. It's 20% off if you book early bird tickets. So please register. It's our first in-person conference since 2019. Oh my gosh. 4 years. So it's going to be really, really excited. I have a feeling that that dance is going to be off the hook. This time around, Tonia's nodding. Yes. So now I'd like to put forward the motion to adjourn the AGM. And there's no discussion for this one. It's really efficient. We just get the mover and a secondary, and we go straight into the vote. And we say thank you so much for taking time out of your day today to engage with us at this virtual AGM. So we'll just give it a minute to see if we've got a mover and a seconder, and we'll go to our vote.
Motion is moved by Cherish Decaire, seconded by Emmanuel Hebert.
Excellent. Thank you, Cherish and Emmanuel. And we'll go straight into the vote on this one.
The motion is carried.
Motion is carried. Wonderful. Thank you everyone so much for attending our 2023 CAM AGM.